Many times in life, we praise and seek the Lord only in good times and often complain when things aren't going our way. But I will praise you always. Music artist, author, actress Rebecca St. James got her start in music at the tender age of 13 when she released an independent album titled Refresh My Heart in her native Australia. She has received countless awards, including a Grammy, #1 singles, and consistently topped both radio and sales charts with millions of albums sold. Through it all, she spoke into the lives of others, sharing the message of pro-life. But God knew she needed rest, but not for long. This is her story of unshakable faith. This is today's Nashville. Rebecca, thank you so much for inviting me into your beautiful home here. It is absolutely gorgeous.
You're so kind. Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Well, you have quite a story from Australia to Nashville.
Yes.
Let's go back.
Yeah. Tell
me how it all started.
Well, I mean, I was a pretty normal kid, I feel like, living in Sydney. Probably the unusual part that I was that I was a Christian and that we were a Christian family because, Australia, I mean, we were kind of founded by English convicts, so it's not, the Christian population is not a huge population. But I was so thankful to actually grow up in a Christian family and gave my life to Jesus when I was 8. Lived kind of a normal life in Sydney, and then lived in Brisbane, which is about 12 hours north of Sydney, for a little bit. Loved growing up there. I mean, I had kangaroos in my backyard. I mean, we had just this wonderful childhood, and moved to the US when I was 14.
What brought you to the US?
So my dad's job, actually, so he was in Christian music in Australia. So probably the other unusual part about my life was that I grew up going to shows. Like, I was 6 weeks old when I went to my first Christian concert in the Sydney Opera House. And so my dad promoted Christian artists in Australia and toured them around. And so we'd just go to shows. So it was a very normal part of my life, this whole Christian music factor. But Dad got offered a job in Nashville when I was 14, and there were 6 kids at that time. My mom was pregnant with my sister, so we all moved over to the US to Nashville, and the new, very different, very adventurous life began at that point, for sure.
Well, you started your career in Australia, right?
A little bit,
okay.
Just a little bit, yeah. So because I'd grown up around a lot of Christian artists, Carmen was actually one of the artists that I kind of got to know. He almost became like an uncle to me. He just treated me like a grown-up in a way, like very kindly, very, very respectfully.
Did you meet him there or here in the States?
Actually, yeah,
okay.
in Australia.
Okay.
So my dad had toured him a few different times. So he asked me to tour with him when I was 13. So that was my first tour. Also did a worship album on my dad's record label in Australia, and that kind of began things.
Was it something that you wanted to do as a little girl, or did it just come natural to you?
I think music was one of those things where I felt like God would possibly lead me into it, but I didn't. It wasn't this overwhelming, I've just got to sing, I've got to be on the stage, passion on that level. I think when I was around 12, I gave my gifts and my talents to God, and I sensed that He might lead me into music, and that was around the time that things started to happen. So very soon after that was the Carmen tour. So I loved acting, though. That was probably one of the things that I wanted to do when I was little.
So when you came to Nashville, then what happened to your career?
Well, so I was still very, very young. I mean, we have a 7-year-old daughter now, and I'm thinking, man, I was just around double her age, when all this was happening. But so we moved to the US. My dad had this job, but a couple months after we moved, that job fell through. So we were on the other side of the world, felt called to be here as a family, but ended up not having any income, and 7 kids at that time.
Did he think about moving back, or?
We did, but it felt like kind of a dead end there. Like, I think that my parents felt like we really were called to be in the US and needed to stick it out through the hard times. So we just prayed, for a car, food, money, sat on the floor. We didn't have any furniture in our house at that point, at the rental. Thankfully, the people that were renting to us were even gracious on rent. But we would just pray specifically for these needs and then see miracles happen. Groceries on our doorstep, people arriving with truckloads of furniture, checks come in the mail that would just pay for the rent. And I mean, for me as a teen, seeing that, I think it gave me something to sing about. So when Eddie DeGarmo from Forefront Records saw me sing at my church in Franklin, just down the road from here, and signed me soon after that, and I went full-time at 16, I actually had something to sing about because I'd seen miracles. I'd seen the power of God.
So where did God take you from there? With a young career at 16, you exploded onto the scene.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was one of those things where I felt God had opened up the doors. I felt like He had orchestrated things. And really coming from that place of, Lord, I just want my life to make a difference. I want to shine for You. I want to be used by You for this adventure, this mission that You have me on this planet for. And so really, as things started growing, I mean, it was really my second album that came out when I was 18, my God album, that really connected. I mean, the first album, I feel like, definitely we saw some strong ministry response, but it was that second album in my late teens that we just started kind of really traveling the world. I mean, opportunities really opened up for travel everywhere, and had a lot of songs that kind of landed on radio. And I mean, it's all these things now that I look back and go, whoa, God was doing so much, and I can appreciate it probably more than just at that time, you're just kind of running to the next thing and, Lord, give me strength to do what You've called me to do. So it was definitely a big faith venture for me.
And was it a family event too? I mean, did your dad get involved? And
Oh, very much so. So, yeah, I honestly think if my dad and I hadn't have been put in the same family, if somehow, well, yeah, I wouldn't exist without my dad, but if the giftings that my dad hadn't been a part of my family life, I wouldn't have done music, because I so needed his management and his vision and his protection, really. I was so young, and I needed this covering that he provided. And so definitely my dad was an integral factor. And then my family kind of traveled really as the first roadies and stage managers and background singers and lighting directors. I mean, they were everything. And it's really cool now to see, because we were homeschooling, would go on the road for all these tours for years and years as a family. And each one of my siblings was groomed for what they're doing now through that time on the road. And we can see how God was prepping them for their unique callings in ministry. So it's been really sweet to see.